Hey guys, what's up? Hope everybody's doing good out there, and thanks for tuning in for today's video, man. Much appreciated. And today I'm going to cover, three different areas, like it said in the title here, about the common mistakes that anglers make during the month of April and how to fix them. And I've been trying to do these videos on, things that will help you right now. I think a lot of videos you see on YouTube they're pretty broad. They're like how to Texas rig a plastic worm or something like that. But I'm trying to sort of gear these videos to something that you can use like right now when you get out on the water, which is the point of today's video, common mistakes people make in April. And a couple things before we get started here real quick. Just wanted to quickly remind everybody that on April 15th, Johnny and I have our next virtual online seminar on fishthemoment.com. We're going to be talking about post-spawn patterns of catching bass. Johnny's going to cover all the offshore stuff. I'm going to be covering all the shallow stuff, and it's going to be a really good, informative 3-hour seminar, interactive. It's going to be a good time, so you can sign up for that at fishthemoment.com. And also, just wanted to remind everybody, when I hit 30,000 subscribers, which it looks like it's probably going to be sometime this coming week, I'll be giving away those new set of Solar Bat Randy Blockett Signature Series sunglasses and a big supply of Bridge for beef jerky. So all you have to do to be entered in that is just subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed, and maybe you have a chance to win that. So anyway, let's talk about the three things that, in my opinion, are the biggest mistakes I see guys making out there in April. First of all, we'll talk about the first ones is they pay way too much attention to water temperature. I hear so many guys out there that ask me, what's the water temperature, in April, thinking the fish, thinking they can figure out the stage that the fish are in. Water temperature plays a factor, but not as much as what a lot of people think it does. It's not as big of a factor. The other variables that are a little bit more important to water temperature are the water levels, as far as if the lake's rising, if it's falling, if the lake's stable, the weather patterns leading up to the time that you're there. You need to pay close attention to that, as far as fronts that have came in, or how stable the weather is. The combination of the preceding weather patterns and the different variables surrounding the water level actually play a more important role than the water temperature as far as how you're going to catch those bass. When you're talking about in April, you're talking about water temperatures depending upon where you're at, between mid 50s to mid 60s for the most part of the country. And that's a real broad range, because when the bass are in when it's in that temperature range, you're going to have bass in all three phases of the spawn. You're going to have some bass that are spawning, some bass that are getting ready to spawn and still in the pre-spawn, and you're going to have bass that probably maybe spawned early and are done spawning. So I guess the point that I'm trying to make here is, don't pay a lot of attention to the water temperature. The other variables of the water level, water clarity, weather patterns sort of override that water temperature. Okay, the second one we'll talk about is your bait selection. And one of the biggest mistakes I see guys making in April is they tend to fish too many moving lures that move horizontally through the water column. One of the things that you're going to find about in April, when those fish are really starting to focus in on bedding and spawning, even if they're not actually bedding, if they're close to it, if they're getting ready to spawn, if they're spawning, or if they've just got done spawning, you're going to do a lot better on the slow bottom bouncing lures, like your jigs, your creature baits, your different types of Texas rigs, drop shots, tubes, Ned rigs, all that type of stuff. It's the bass, their personality changes a little bit in April when they start to get into that spawning mode. And when I'm talking about spawning mode, I'm not talking about spawning laying eggs. That's a small window of the time during the spawning season. The spawning season is spread out over a course of a period of time that goes much longer, besides just actually laying eggs. But what you're going to find is, when those fish when there's a shift in them biologically, and they start locking down on those beds, or focusing on building beds, or just getting done on beds, there's something about the bite changes on there. I do a lot better, like I said, going to slower bottom bouncing lures in April than I do with my crankbaits and all that type of stuff, spinner baits. Although you can, if you have one of those conditions where you have the weather patterns are a little bit behind, a little bit colder than normal, that sort of offsets some of the stuff that I'm talking about. But for the most part, as a general rule of thumb, there's always exceptions to the rule. You can remember that. You're going to find that if you go to those pitching and flipping and casting the soft plastics and jigs in April, you're going to be a lot more consistent in how many bass you catch, and you're going to catch bigger ones too. Okay, the third mistake I see guys make a lot of time is they simply fish the wrong part of the lake. And when you're fishing a lake that has, you know, that's fairly large, and when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about man-made reservoirs that are like over 10,000 acres. And we fish, you know, almost every state out there has got lakes like here in Missouri where they're 30, 40,000 acres or bigger. You got a tremendous amount of diversity, excuse me, a tremendous amount of diversity in, you know, what's available out there as far as cover, water clarities, and that type of stuff. One of the things that you're going to find out in April is by selecting the part of the lake that is more conducive to when those fish are getting into spawning mode, you're going to do a lot better. And the biggest advice that I would give you guys as far as in the month of April is stay away from like the upper part of the lake or like the mid upper part of the lake. Normally what you have in that type of a situation is you've got a little bit more dirty water, the banks flatten out a little bit, you know, you don't have quite as many spawning coves as you do down the lake. And while I'm not saying that area can't be good, in most of the lakes across the country, you're going to find that in April, that lower end to the mid to lower end is going to be your prime area. You're going to have better water clarity down there. You got to usually have a little bit more rock. Usually the spawning habitat for what the fish look for is a little bit better. You've normally got a little bit more late pre-spawn habitat, like secondary points within the coves, that type of stuff, that those bass use during the pre and post spawn after they get done spawning back in those coves there. So anyway, that's the three mistakes I see guys making a lot in April. Like I said, is they pay too much attention to water temperature. You know, they fish moving baits too much over slow baits, and they're simply just in the wrong part of the lake. So try those, guys. I'm telling you, I mean, it's worked for me. It's something that I've sort of deduced over fishing for 40 plus years across the country. That's sort of my rule of thumb. And that's my starting point. While I'm telling you this, you always have to remember in bass fishing, there's exceptions to the rule. And, you know, nobody has the absolutes. That, you know, bass don't read books. And that's why, you know, I always say it's the most difficult sport that there is in fishing. So, you know, from that standpoint, you use it as your foundation. And when you get out on the lake, you can always modify it. You know, you can see what the conditions are at the time you're fishing, but you have to start somewhere there. So anyway, again, thanks for tuning in, guys. Much appreciated. Appreciate you guys subscribing if you haven't, liking the video, and we'll be back soon with another one. See you.